Live and just hope anybody. Okay, guys, we are back. We are live, and hopefully you will all do your due diligence. I'm sure you were to find out where the new link for the show is, and if not, then you guys are going to listen to this later. But after that glitch, I am back with Robert Guffey, and we were in the middle of talking about some pretty interesting things with regard to the Republican National Convention, MAGA, and things that are going on in our political and our climate here today. And so, where were we before that little glitch in the matrix?
I'm trying to remember. Land grabs, Hunter S. Thompson, Joe Biden. Oh, yeah, cognitive dissonance. We were talking about.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. So you hear Trump say, on one hand, Joe Biden's like this brain dead, senile old man, crypt keeper kind of guy, and then on the other hand, he's like this ruthless head of the Biden crime family. And he'll say both of these things at the same time as if both could be true at the same time, and they can't, but they'll hold both of these realities together and never question them. I've heard people say, I've heard Donald Trump, I've heard other Trump MAGA people say that Antifa and Black Lives Matter caused the riots on January 6th, and in the same breath, they'll say there were no riots on January 6th. It was a completely peaceful protest that was just distorted by the mainstream media. It was just colored by the way the mainstream media presented January 6th. In reality, it was a peaceful protest. So how can it be both? How can Antifa and Black Lives Matter turn a peaceful protest into a riot, and then at the same time, there were no riots? It was just like perception management. And Sturfael Stevenson, who's the co-host of Conspiranormal podcast, he did a really great presentation at the last Strange Realities conference, where he made a very important point. He pointed out how these MAGA conservatives are obsessed with the idea that there are these evil elites who've been secretly in control of America for hundreds of years, but they're also afraid of subversives changing the way American society is structured. So that's inherently contradictory. How can our corrupt society be ruled top down by satanic elitists, but at the same time, it's a Christian republic that's in danger of being subverted by this bottom-up revolution of demonic anarchists, right? Who are threatening to topple the way our society has always been. So, in other words, they want it both ways. They want to see themselves as the rightful traditional rulers of the U.S. and also the victims of this vast conspiracy that's held sway over the United States for hundreds of years. You can't subvert something that's been corrupt from the very beginning, according to them.
Right.
But it's like they want to see themselves as the victim and the hero. At the same time, I remember noticing that when in 2004, I had a student invite me to go see Billy Graham at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. And at first I said no, and then it started to seem more and more perverse to me. So I said, okay, let's do it. So I think she was trying to save me or something. So I went there, Pasadena, the Rose Bowl. It's just like thousands of the God Squad and me and Billy Graham. It's one of the last times Billy Graham spoke in public. Jim Caviezel was there, because this was soon after the Last Temptation of Christ, or not the Last Temptation of Christ, the Mel Gibson Passion of the Christ. And Jim Caviezel was there. He spoke. A bunch of Christian kind of grunge bands played. They were selling Bible calculators. And Billy Graham got up. And he starts speaking, and there's this huge screen that's the size of the opening shot in Blade Runner, where you see the Japanese woman holding up the Coca-Cola. It was like that size of a huge screen, and Billy Graham's face is magnified 1,000 times, and he's talking, and then suddenly a lone voice out in the crowd yells out, "Billy Graham's the Antichrist," and it's this guy who looked like the dude in the cartoons who has like wearing a robe and like a long beard with a sign that says "The end is nigh." He looked kind of like that, but he had a sign that said Billy Graham is the Antichrist. He starts yelling, "Hey, Billy Graham!" And Billy Graham's face magnified 1,000 times. You start to see him. He gets concerned. You see like flop sweat appearing on his forehead, and the security guards come out and grab this old guy, and they like start beating him with batons or whatever, and they drag him out by his beard across the football field. And I don't know what happened to him after that. But Billy Graham takes this opportunity to say, "You see, we're still being persecuted. They still want to throw us to the lions." And everyone in the crowd is like, "Yeah," and they're roaring. And I'm like, this was like 2004, and everyone here wanted to see themselves as that they were the ones being victimized. And it was one guy. It was like one guy in the crowd yelling out something negative to Billy Graham, and they all took that as an opportunity to perceive themselves as being the injured party.
Can you imagine if those people were on Twitter today? Well, yeah, we can actually.
Yes, I think we can imagine that.
It's happening in real time.
Yeah, we don't have to imagine it. So now, ever since the assassination attempt, all these MAGA Republicans are pointing fingers. We need to pull the brakes on all this inflammatory, hateful political discourse promulgated by the left. Like, wait, what? The same people who just nominated Trump as their candidate, they want to pull the brakes on the hateful political discourse,
right?
And they say it with utter no sense of self-consciousness, no self-reflection. It's like they live in their own solipsistic quantum bubble, and they've been telling these lies so often. I think that they believe it now.
You know what? It is really bizarre. And I have friends and family members that are supporters of the former president. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people they get little glimpses of, oh, this sounds really cool because yes, there are migrants in our city, and oh, there's so many homeless people in tents, and all the horrors, and how is that affecting you? I'm not quite sure, but whatever. And so they've been really good at marketing, at figuring out, at data mining, at figuring out how people tick, and then just constantly dripping their talking points and their misinformation and disinformation. It's just been it's been brilliant. I mean, you got to hand it to them. Who'd have thought that clown car salesman would be running the country and the terror of the world?
But yeah, well, obviously their concern for homelessness is not a selfless one. When I saw that ad at the beginning of the movie last night, where they briefly showed the invisibility shield, something occurred to me that they can use the optical camouflage technology. And they'll distribute it among homeless people so they can make themselves invisible, and then the MAGA Republicans don't have to see them.
I like it. That would actually be a good use of technology.
So how Trump's always saying, in every single speech he says he's the victim of a witch hunt?
Yes.
He'll always use that phrase, witch hunt. He used it last night more than once. And which is interesting. We were talking about land grabs. The Salem witch trials. One of the motivating factors there was that a lot of the old widows who were being accused of being witches were actually property owners, and they owned a lot of land. And so the older women, the more land that they owned, the more likely they were to be accused of being a witch. And then they would get them out of the way, and then they would grab the land.
Okay.
And so if you want to see what 2025 is going to be like, I suggest watching a Vincent Price film called Witchfinder General, which is an amazing film from the 70s. And Vincent Price plays the Witchfinder. And I think you'll see parallels to our current situation.
Okay, I'm gonna
But
watch it tonight.
it's a tough watch. Just give you give you a little warning about that. But
Oh, thank you.
it's a very it's a worthwhile film. Vincent Price turns in an incredible performance. Um, just so okay, he's always saying it's a witch hunt. They got a witch hunt against me. It's ironic that he says that because just a few months ago in one of my creative writing classes, I teach a class called creative nonfiction, and that's where the students write autobiographical stories, stories about things that have actually happened to them. And this one student turns in a story about she's working at the store where she's stocking items, and this just happened to her just earlier this year. This elementary school field trip files into the store, and the second grader, this little boy, walks up to her and says, "What's that?" And he points at this rainbow pride pin that she's wearing, and my student says, "Oh, that's a rainbow pride pin." And the little boy goes, "Well, why are you wearing it?" And my student says, "Oh, well, I'm gay." And the little boy points at her and says, "Then you're going to hell." And then he starts following her around the store, going, "You're a witch." And my student's like, "Get lost, kid." Like where the hell are your parents? And he goes, "Just because a witch works here doesn't mean I can't shop here." So this little kid, like right out of the bad seed, he's like stalking her, following her
Oh,
through the aisles. Finally, she gets behind the cash register just to get away from him. And my students like, just go find your teacher. And the boy goes, "You can't tell me what to do, witch." And he gets behind the counter. He starts pushing all the buttons on the cash register. This is a second grader. So,
oh,
so even like 7-year-olds are becoming radicalized, and this is we're talking woke California, right? This is Southern California. Keep that in
wow.
mind. What's it like in other parts of the country? So my students said these kids were wearing uniforms. So I don't know if it was a religious school. Who knows? But whoever the teachers were, they were not in any hurry to rein the kid in. And you wonder about the parents. Like, how did the kid get this way?
That's the crazy thing. I remember maybe it was like a year and a half ago, there was a story about a little kid he was in grade school, and he went to school, and he had all of these badges on his backpack. I mean, the "Don't Tread on Me," and I think there were a few that were even more inflammatory than that. If you can imagine that. But I mean, the parents were just all up in everybody's grill about that, and it was just like, seriously. I mean, it's great to have your opinions, but since this is a child is learning, they're learning about, I mean, well, I guess they're not learning about anything, because to hell with education, and we're going to burn all the books and give you what we want, and then we're going to force your children to go to be in the military. And I mean, it's
Oh,
just,
right.
Project 2025. I mean, the whole
Yeah.
thing is just like so surreal, and it's sad to see. You can feel as if the climate wasn't strange enough during COVID, but now you've got this extra layer of like, you're going, out in public, and you see people, and I mean, it is interesting to see people's demeanor. It is interesting to see what they're wearing. It is interesting to see that, I mean, last night I was going home, and I saw, a couple people with Trump flags draped around their necks and things, and I was just like, "Oh my God," I mean, it's a very, it's going to be a very interesting time, and I think for me, as you know, because you've written about Chris, my ex, it's just to have that insider knowledge of being with somebody who's been radicalized and who was unhinged and capable of really deadly things, it's really does make me kind of my hair stand up and just like, oh my God, this is going to be a freaking trip.
And it's always couched in, um, it's always couched in, we have to save the children. The children are in danger of being indoctrinated. Uh, Meanwhile, like who's doing the indoctrination? Uh, the story that my student told me about this kid, it reminded me of I grew up in Torrance. If you've ever seen Boogie Nights, you'll
Yep.
know Torrance. The Mark Wahlberg character is living in Torrance in Boogie Nights. There was a small cable station called City Cable 22 in Torrance, and it was run by the city. So it wasn't like a private corporation. If you went through all the proper channels, if you filled out the paperwork, you did the training, they had to give you airtime, and they couldn't reject you because they like disagreed with your point of view. So the Tom Metzger organization got a half-hour news show. Metzger was a white supremacist and a member of the KKK.
Yeah.
So this news show was like, it was like the news of the day, but through the filter of white supremacists. And it was like more blatant and interface than Newsmax or any of these other hard right news stations that we have now. The creepiest thing about it was that it was done in the format of like a mainstream 5 o'clock network news hour with two newscasters sitting behind a table reeling off all this insane Nazi rhetoric. One of the newscasters was maybe 15 or 16-year-old girl with long dark hair and pale skin. I mean, she looked like an evil Snow White. And then
Oh,
the
really?
other newscaster was this like blonde-haired, blue-eyed 8-year-old boy. So it was
Oh,
like,
trippy.
it was really bizarre. And they would read this crap very professionally, never flubbing a line, never blinking. These like hollow stares in their eyes, and it was like something out of a dystopian science fiction movie. And they were completely brainwashed or under duress. I always kind of half expected the camera to swivel off to the right, and you'd see some militia guy like pointing a rifle at their head.
God.
You better keep reading the news. It was really wild, and sometimes I wonder like what happened to those two kids. Like
Right.
maybe they grew up and opened up a Hobby Lobby or something. But
In all likelihood, yes.
there's so in the one story, the kid comes in, he's calling my student a witch, right? There's a crazy MAGA pastor in Tennessee named Greg Locke who claims that there are actual witches who have infiltrated his congregation, and I wrote about him in an article I published on Salon. The article was called "QAnon's Weirdest Obsession: Why Does the Radical Far Right Fear the Masons?" It was all about the increasing incidence of violence against Freemasons from the right. And so Locke's this like total paranoid, actually accusing women in his church of practicing black magic against him. Um, and then I came across this news article. This is from May of 2022. This is from the New York Post, which is a fairly conservative newspaper. But let me briefly read you this short excerpt. It says, it was a fate she couldn't predict. The 51-year-old Queens woman gunned down in her own home was a tarot card reader, and cops believe she was killed by a disgruntled customer who thought the witch had cursed him, sources told the Post Thursday. Giuseppe Canzani, 41, allegedly admitted to shooting Anna Torres after she'd answered the door to her Ozone Park home around 2:30 p.m. Wednesday because she was a witch, according to sources. Canzani believed the clairvoyant, who did fortune and tarot card readings out of her home, had cast a spell on him and cursed him, one source said. Yeah, that's the woman I shot, Canzani allegedly told detectives at the 106th Precinct Station House about 1 hour after the fatal shooting at the home on 109th Avenue. She tried to kill me. If I tell you what's going on with me, you wouldn't believe it, he allegedly said. Not for nothing. I'm supposed to be dead already. That's all I know. This woman, you guys will never understand. You'd think I'm crazy. And the title of the article is Queen's Slave Victim Was Tarot Card Reader Shot Dead by Customer Who Called Her Witch. from May 5th of 2022. I just think it's interesting that like Trump is going around saying it's a witch hunt. They're mounting a witch hunt against me. Meanwhile, they're literally hunting witches. Like they're
I mean,
they're killing witches and like burning books. It's entirely medieval.
yes, you are absolutely right. And I had not made that connection until you said that. So the light is on now, finally.
I mean, QAnon. It's. I mean, they literally think that there are witches and demons that they're fighting. It's not a metaphor because Trump means it metaphorically, but they're literally killing witches. There's in August of 2017. Now this is in Huntington Beach. Huntington Beach is like Surf City, USA, right?
Mhm.
I mean that's its official like Surf City, USA. Uh, here's a brief article. It says Juan Cadavid organized a book burning event with Brian Enright of the Three Percenters, who had a presence on January 6th, to be held at Huntington State Beach, California. The event was dubbed Burning Degeneracy, California, but they have recently decided to cancel the event out of fear. According to the OC Weekly, the group advertised the August 19th event by telling people that it was time to purge their homes, state, and country of degenerate literature. This includes literature of Marxism, communism, Bolshevism, literature with liberal, democratic tendencies, attitudes, and writings supporting the decline of Western culture. The event description reads, quote, books on sexuality and sexual education which serves to indoctrinate the life of degeneracy, such as Cosmo and Teen Vogue, should be brought to the fire as well. We will also burn the Quran, publications such as Karl Marx, and more. We must create a future without degeneracy for our children. Again, the children theme comes in. And the title, this was from Raw Story. The title of the article is Alt-Right Cancels California Book Burning of Degenerate Literature After Organizer Says He Fears Liberals. And so now it's interesting, the theme about the children, because on Tuesday, the second day of the convention, Carrie Lake spoke. And she said that saving the children was what MAGA was all about. And she said, quote, the radical left has found themselves between a mama bear and her baby cub. So killing witches, banning and burning books, all in the name of saving the children from demons. And, you know, it's like, remember, I wrote about in Operation Mindfuck that the Christian surf instructor in Santa Barbara who spear gunned his two kids because he thought they were shape-shifting reptoids. I mean, that's another form of hunting witches. I mean, he thought they were shape-shifting reptiles, but essentially he was hunting witches. And it's, you know, Carl Sagan wrote a book called The Demon Haunted World.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we are. we're in the demon haunted world.
Read that again.
Oh yeah, it would be definitely worth. That's definitely worth taking a look at. On the very first day of the convention, Tim Scott, and this is a paraphrase, he said, "We're not building the next 4 years. We're building the next 40 years," and everyone roared and cheered and applauded. Keep that in mind. I wouldn't discount that as hyperbole on his part.
No.
And then he went on to say, he said, prayer works. Prayer works in regard to he's talking about the assassination attempt, implying that Christian prayer somehow, I guess, like manifested Thomas Crooks on the rooftop, and then this 20-year-old nursing home employee killed a fireman and then nicked Trump's ear, and that was the result of Christian prayer, I guess. I don't know. It's a weird thing to pray for. But he said, this is a nation based on faith. And then you have to wonder, like, whose faith? Is the Christian faith? You know, it's very, you know, while implying that, going on and on about how they're the ones being victimized. And you know, they just passed an actual law where you have to display in Tennessee, you have to display the 10 Commandments in the
Yes, I saw that. Insane.
Right. But they're the ones who are for free speech, of course, right? Um,
Absolutely. And, don't tread on me, get off my rights, and you better not tell me what to do with, I mean, all of this. And it's like, yeah, great, but now we're going to have a national abortion ban and women's rights and, the rights of everyone but the white guy. Let's just be real. I mean, that's just we're hosed. And I just, and I want to just really quickly bring up the fact that in the UFO world, there's a fellow by the name of D. Dean Johnson who wrote, kind of trashed one of Jacques Vallée's his latest book, but Dee Dee Johnson is one of those guys behind the scenes that for the past like 3 decades has been the biggest lobbyist for national right to life. And so it's always interesting when you start peeling back like the layers and saying, what's this person doing over here? And oh my gosh, this is what you're actually doing in the real world. And it's just it's I think we don't pay enough attention to what people's real motivations are, what their real day job is, to be honest.
right. Well, yeah, absolutely. The it's also interesting that ever since the assassination attempt, it's like, oh, the liberals, they caused this because of their language of hate. Meanwhile, just ignoring like all the bombed abortion clinics and all the women who are going to die because abortion is illegal. They don't think about that at all. But instead they're focused on like Trump's boo boo. Uh, it's I mean, talk about taking something out of proportion. It's incredible. The hypocrisy is palpable. Um, I watched a lot of the Newsmax coverage of the convention,
Oh, I
and
bet that was a trip.
one of the most revealing moments was when the moderator Rob Schmidt, who's like a regular political commentator on Newsmax, he looks eerily like Rod Serling. Schmidt was talking with Matt Taibbi, who oddly enough is a fellow Or Books author, but he's now perceived as being a conservative journalist because he wrote about the Twitter files for Musk.
Yes. Yep.
So I guess Matt Taibbi was there, like covering the convention, and Rob Schmidt's talking to Matt Taibbi, and I suddenly realized at one point that these people don't know what democracy is. Schmidt, he thought that it was a contradiction, that it was completely hypocritical that Joe Biden would call Trump an existential threat to democracy one day and then wish for his speedy recovery the next day. So this is a direct quote from Rob Schmidt. He said, if you really think he's an existential threat, you should want to see him executed, right? So in other words, he's saying that wishing Trump a speedy recovery proves that Biden and the left don't really believe he's an existential threat to democracy.
Oh,
Like
God.
he cannot conceive in his like medieval feudal mind that like I don't want to see Trump executed. I want to see him voted down once and for all, so it's clear who lost and who won. But Rob Schmidt's immediate attitude was, well, Biden can't be sincere in wishing him a speedy recovery because if he's your enemy, why wouldn't you want him to be assassinated? it's it's like literally a psychotic point of view.
I don't even know what to, my jaw is on the floor, which is, it's been there for quite some time now, but that is just, it is amazing how the thought process and turning things around like that. And it's like, when did we become so out of touch with reality that we can't, as two having two different, well, I mean, even though Trump is a threat to democracy, let's be real, but as President Biden did reach out and make sure that another person is okay. I mean, that isn't that what we should be doing in a civilized world?
That's the other thing. They're after the assassination attempt, they're saying, oh, hey, wait, you shouldn't be saying he's a threat to democracy. You shouldn't be saying that he's a fascist. So these are the people who supposedly support free speech, but you can't call a fascist, and you can't call a threat to democracy a threat to democracy. What are you supposed to call it? Let me briefly quote from the novelist Steve Erickson. He wrote this on a website called Journal of the Plague Years back on January 1st of this year, and it's 2 brief paragraphs. He said, while wishing Trump to be accountable before the law We must accept that any trial or decision by a higher court is unlikely to spare the country what it karmically doesn't deserve to be spared, a national political referendum on who we are as a people. Otherwise, Trump will evermore, in the eyes of history, not to mention his supporters, who will find a way to believe it in any case, be martyred to a systemic technicality. Trump needs to be rejected electorally by every single patriot who can drag her or himself to the polls to do so. The culture war was lost more than a half a century ago when some kid on the right side of a policy dispute over America's Vietnam conflagration put himself and the rest of us on the wrong side of everything else the moment he lit an American flag on fire. We should be wrapping ourselves in the flag every chance we have. We should make clear in our own minds and in the public mind that we are the true Americans in this Civil War. We are the Americans of the Bill of Rights and constitutional preamble of Gettysburg and Normandy, the Americans of happiness's eternal pursuit and memory's mystic chord, and our nature's better angels. Between now and November, we should insist on this again and again on a daily, if not hourly basis, that on the other side of whatever twisted nation Trump and Fox News might choose to forge is the true America, which is to say our America, which is to say the America of limitless and regenerative possibility. That entire essay is called 13 New Year's Resolutions for Saving Democracy by Steve Erickson.
I love it.
Who's a wonderful, an amazing writer. He wrote an essay many years ago for the LA Weekly called American Weimar. And it's very prescient. And I suggest going to Google and just looking up American Weimar, Steve Erickson, and you'll probably find the article. And it's worth taking a look at.
Thank you for sharing that.
It's a wonderful piece of writing. It's interesting how since we're both sort of engaged in the fields of ufology or high strangeness or conspiracy theory or whatever the hell you want to call it. but it's interesting that now, in the wake of the assassination attempt, you have like two competing. You have like the left-wing conspiracy theory about what happened, and then the right-wing conspiracy theory about what's actually going on. I was the way I heard about it was my wife and I had gone that day, the day of the assassination attempt. My wife and I had gone to the movies to see Maxine, which is the third film in a trilogy with starring Mia Goth. First one's called X, which is all about, it takes place in like 1979, and these people go to this abandoned farm, this obscure farm in the middle of Texas to film a porno, and then it quickly descends into being a horror movie.
All right.
And then the second film is called Pearl, which takes place in 1918, is a prequel. Then the third movie, which is in the theaters now, is called Maxine with 3 X's, and takes place in 1985. And there's interesting, particularly in the third movie, and even in the second movie, there's interesting political parallels to our current situation, to everything that we're talking about right now. And in Maxine, this isn't a spoiler in any way, but one of the last lines of dialogue in the film is Mia Goth saying the words "divine intervention." So we saw the movie, we leave, we get in the car, we turn on the radio, and on the radio I hear there's just been, Trump's just been shot, and there's been this assassination attempt, and they're talking to one of the bystanders in the crowd, and one of the bystanders saying, "Oh, it was amazing. It was like the hand of God came down and just like diverted that bullet." And Melissa turns to me and says, "Oh man, this is bad." And then I turned to her and I said, "Divine intervention."
Yeah.
Now, of course, it's using Occam's razor. It's the situation is probably exactly what it appears to be, right?
Right.
But I mean, at this point, there's no reason to think that this is like a Daley Plaza situation. There's no indications that there were like multiple shooters firing from several different directions at once. I mean, JFK, you've got like at least three shooters firing from 3 different directions. In the RFK assassination, you've got like 2 shooters firing. If there had been multiple shooters, Trump would be dead.
Right.
If Trump was JFK, he'd be dead. So,
Right.
but I've heard a QAnon people saying, well, there were 3 shooters. There was the kid on the roof who's an MK Ultra victim. The satanic Freemasonic Illuminati cult made this kid into the patsy. Then the real shooter was on the water tower. um, and then meanwhile, then on the left, you have people saying the whole thing was staged. And I do have to admit that my mind went there briefly at the beginning,
Right. Mine did too.
because Trump's entire life has been like one long series of photo ops. Yeah, how can your mind not go there? Briefly at least. And I thought to myself, when I got home and I actually saw the footage, I thought, is this kayfabe? Is this like a scene out of professional wrestling? Where they go down on the mat and pull a razor blade out of their boot and make a wound on their face. And then you hear Trump on the hot mic going, "I need my shoes." I was like, why does he not have his shoes on? Is that where the razor blade was?
That
Um, and,
that
and then
was odd. That was odd. And I totally agree. Like, that was. I went there. I did go there because, like you said, nothing about what he's put forward is all a mirage.
sure. Well, in the court case where he got convicted, what was the information that came out? The information that came out was that he and his people were working with the head of the National Enquirer to create fake news
Hmm.
and to distract from the situations that were going to make him look bad, which is the ultimate irony. He's fake news, fake news, fake news, and here we have a case where it was proven during the trial that he was going out of his way to manufacture fake news with the National Enquirer. And then also in terms of like the whole like pro wrestling aspect of it, I thought it was funny that Linda McMahon, the wife of Vince McMahon,
Hmm.
she was the president of World Wrestling Entertainment.
Yep.
She spoke at the 4th night of the convention.
Oh.
She served as the administrator of the Small Business Administration during Trump's first administration.
Mhm.
So she spoke at the convention. Hulk Hogan spoke on the 4th night.
I can't unsee that at all.
And the great thing was he spoke right before Billy Graham's son spoke, which is like weirdly appropriate. And at one point during Hulk Hogan's speech, he says, "The last time I saw Trump was when he was sitting ringside when I won the world championship of the WWF." And you're going, wait a minute, like when you play acted winning the world championship, it's just like so appropriate that there'd be these like figures in pro wrestling there, on the same night that Trump is speaking. So I don't think it's entirely irrational that people were entertaining these thoughts of a staged shooting, at least briefly. But
Right.
just because he's such a carnival showman, however, I don't think even Trump would be crazy enough to say to a sniper, "Can you make sure you miss me by a centimeter?" you know,
Right. Right. And I mean, and the fact is, I mean, people lost a person lost their life, and
absolutely.
it was amazing to me to see some of the interviews with people in the crowd, and they were standing there. There's one woman that was on different outlets, and she was just saying, we were all so concerned about Trump that we just didn't sit down because we would have just, I mean, basically alluding to the fact that she would put herself in front of, any bullets, for Trump. And I'm just thinking, okay, does anybody here realize that he would never do the same for you?
No, no, that there is something he pointed out during his speech that was absolutely true, where he said normally in a situation like this, people run for the exits, and he said they didn't do that. They were so concerned about me. He actually
Yep,
said
I heard that.
they were so concerned about me that they did not move, and thus, a lot of people didn't get stampeded or trampled, and he's absolutely right about that, which is amazing. I was just a few days ago. I was talking to Damien, who I wrote
Oh,
about in Camellia,
okay.
and Damien knows a lot of homeless people, and he told me, he goes, you'd be amazed at how many homeless people are Trump supporters.
Oh my gosh.
And I go, is it like, do they think to themselves, one day I'm gonna like hit the lottery, and then I'll be able to come back here and piss on all these other people on the streets? And Damien said that's exactly what it's like. It's just exactly what it's like. And I said it's kind of like Stockholm syndrome. You know how you begin to the kidnapped
Yes.
victim begins to identify with the kidnapper and bond with the kidnapper. I think I almost feel like it's like all of the United States is undergoing Stockholm syndrome. Uh,
Absolutely.
there's a trend I noticed in entertainment about 15 years ago, which was a series of hit television shows, and in fact, all the television shows I'm about to name were all extremely well written and well acted and all of that. So I'm not casting aspersions on the quality of the shows. I'm just saying it was interesting to notice this pattern, which was that a lot of them, the main character was like a middle-aged white guy whose superpower was psychologically manipulating other people. So whether that was like Walter White in Breaking Bad, or Saul Goodman in Better Call Saul, or Dexter Morgan in Dexter, or the Kevin Spacey character in House of Cards, or the John Hamm character in Mad Men, um, and I'm there's other examples in there that I'm forgetting, but their main superpower was being able to manipulate themselves out of situations. They were all doing something criminal, but they knew how to finesse their way out of it. And these were like the most popular shows on television. Now I don't know what causes that. It's just some like weird eruption out of the Jungian subconscious, but it's almost like uh, being entertained by your own situation. you know,
Right.
like someone who's kidnapped bonding with the kidnapper,
Hmm.
and maybe this explains why, uh, against all previous examples of like, human beings are pretty like primal animals. I'm under attack, I'm going to look out for myself. No, you had like a whole crowd saying, oh no, is he okay?
And I mean, I mean, people have just they've been brainwashed. They've been conditioned. It's like training, recruiting people for the military and
Oh
training
yeah.
them to go fight the good fight and risk their lives for the cause, I mean, it's really interesting to watch the way people have been brainwashed. And it's
they,
sad,
and they think they think everyone else is brainwashed.
right? And they've been
That's
given the magic pill, and he's the savior, like you were mentioning, and it's like there's something new and different here, and it's like I'm stunned. Like every day is like a new day when you turn on the TV, and because you've been so traumatized by this crap for so long, and you're being gaslit at every angle. And now we've got this, we're living this heightened anxiety where they've created this environment where it's okay for people to go into a crowd, a teenager with a semi-automatic weapon and kill another person, and they get off. I mean, so it's this environment has been created, and it is like, how does anybody ever get out of it? Is there ever any way in our lifetime to get out of this?
it's in Operation Mindfuck, I pointed out the major irony of the whole. First of all, the fact that QAnon, MAGA adopted the metaphor of the Matrix as one of their main creation myths by using the red pill blue pill language and describing themselves as red pilled. It's of course it's a further irony that two trans women created the Matrix. They're always referring to it as their like fictional template, and they'll say they're red pilled, and of course it's the exact opposite. They took the blue pill and they don't know it. Um, and it's also strange that Republicans, they don't give a crap when an AR-15 like takes out 33 school kids, but when their candidate gets a Band-Aid, So suddenly mass shooters with guns are like a major concern. You know, when kids get killed, the QAnon crowd insists they didn't even exist in the first
Oh
place.
my
But when
God.
Trump gets shot, there's no questioning the reality of the injuries.
I mean, is that, and that is such a great point. And I just always think about, I mean, and this has been a lot of the talk since the assassination attempt, is, you've got the people like Alex Jones who now have free reign again. They're out there, they're good friends with, people in the Trump campaign. And it is amazing and insulting. And I can't even imagine what it would be to be a parent of one of the Parkland shooters. Yeah, I mean, of
Oh
one of the
yeah,
children that were murdered,
yeah.
young school children, and to see this disgusting human being that has profited off of telling lies like this, and to see the extreme right parrot this kind of crap. I mean, and to see that, the assassination attempt, a person lost their life, and yet we're talking about, let's just arm ourselves more. Let's put more gunpower, firepower, let's give it to another person who's been radicalized. That sounds great.
I
I mean,
the
I don't get it.
Have you seen the documentary about Alex Jones and the whole court case? I can't remember
I
what it's called.
did.
It's like the People versus Alex Jones or
Hmm.
something like that. And what was fascinating about it was even after everything that had been done to them, some of the parents, like Alex Jones, approaches them in the courtroom at one point and it is talking to them, and you can see that the parents are so human that they're actually willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Uh, uh, and and uh, and then he immediately just goes back to doing what he was doing. He just leaves the courtroom, goes back right back on the air, and just keeps mocking the whole situation. Uh, that's really incredible. Um, the when I saw the right after the when I saw the footage for the first time of the assassination attempt, I I suddenly thought of L. Ron Hubbard wrote a weird novel back in the 40s called Death's Deputy, and it was serialized in a magazine called Unknown, some point in the 1940s. And the idea of the novel is just like there are people who are accident prone, there are people who are constantly in the middle of various catastrophes and accidents, but nothing ever happens to them. Like everybody around them is taken out by falling rubble or
Hmm.
somersaulting cars or whatever, but they just remain in the quiet center and they're okay. And in Hubbard's story, that sort of accident-proof person is called Death's Deputy. And I thought Trump is Death's Deputy. He's like the guy who's just everyone's getting picked off around him, but just somehow he like walks through the wreckage perfectly fine. Um, on the third day of the convention, Kristi Noem said that she was still reeling from Trump's near death experience, and she said that she had talked to Trump briefly about the whole situation, and she said Trump said to her, "quote God has always been important to me, but now I know I have a purpose," unquote.
Oh my. Oh.
Eh, that there,
Said the narcissistic psychopath. Yep.
there's nothing more dangerous than an amoral, agnostic narcissist disguised as a Christian who suddenly discovers God.
You
You
know?
know, I mean, he's not like when he remember when he did the photo op of holding the Bible in
Oh,
front
of
of the church,
course. Yeah.
like he doesn't give a shit about any of that. I mean, it's like when I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh. That Rush Limbaugh, he's just like a libertarian, laissez-faire capitalist. Like that's his thing. It's like Ayn Rand kind of dude. But part of his base is Christian, so he would occasionally throw the red meat to the Christians in his audience. And I know whenever he would say God, he would always say it in this weird way. He'd go "God," like GAWD.
Mm.
It was almost like a little like a tell, like a tell in a poker game, like that. He really wasn't taking it seriously. Like that's not what really got him off was was just told like laissez-faire capitalism, just removing the restrictions and drill baby drill, right? I mean, that's actually Trump's religion is drill baby drill. It's
Yep.
nothing to do with Christianity or the Bible, you know. But if in fact he was telling the truth to Kristi Noem, when he said, "Oh no, now I know that God's on my side," then that's where things get really dangerous. If he actually convinces himself, "Oh no, I really am a Christian and God really is on my side."
And and I'm trying to just kind of picture that being real, him actually thinking that. Do you think he? I don't think he. I don't know. I don't know. I don't
It's
want to
hard.
know what that guy's thinking.
It's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine that would be sincere. But I guess stranger things have happened. I know the wife of the retired fireman who
Hmm.
was killed. I thought this was fascinating. She refused to take Joe Biden's call when the president called her to give her his condolences. She refused the call because she said her husband wouldn't have wanted her to take the phone call. But by that point, Trump hadn't even bothered to call her.
I know.
Apparently, he talked to her later, or so he claimed in the speech last night. But by that point, he had not tried to call her. So like the fireman who literally took a bullet for Trump, and Trump like didn't even bother to call the guy's wife until days later, and the wife said she'd still be voting for him.
No, I mean, and that's just so. I mean, it's heartbreaking. I'm like,
Oh
it
yeah,
really is heartbreaking to know that. I mean, I can't even imagine the trauma that everyone in that crowd endured. Nobody ever wants to see that, and they're never going to get over it. And his family lost their dad, her husband, and it is horrific. And her response was very interesting, and I'm sure that she's still, and probably for a long, long time, going to be in shock about that. But it's just I don't know at what point in time people are going to snap out of this. Is it when everybody's lost their job because they work for the federal government? Is it when the media has completely been taken over by certain people, and everybody's getting censored? I mean, at what point our kids are getting thrown into the military? Like, at what point are we going to wake up? More women are dying because they can't have access to health care. It's like, it's just insane to me that people are being so, we're in a really, really, we're in a bad shape.
it's
And
similar. Her reaction reminded me of the reaction of the husband of Ashley Babbitt. Ashley Babbitt, is the woman who was shot and killed on January 6th.
yep.
And her husband blames the left, blames the cabal. Yeah, it's madness. Even he lost his wife, and then I remember the day afterwards, or maybe it was 2 days afterwards. Rick Renee, who's one of these QAnon people, went on the air and said that Ashley Babbitt maybe never even existed, or she was actually an undercover agent. And if you recall, one of the slogans of QAnon was "Where we go one, we go all." But whenever any one of these people actually takes it upon themselves to do something, to either shoot up a pizza place or to storm the Capitol, their fellow compatriots will immediately go on the air and say, "Oh, that person really worked for the deep state. That wasn't an actual MAGA person. That was just some sort of disinformation thing to make us look bad." So so these people who are actually willing to take one for the team, they think they're gonna like die and rise to Valhalla, and instead all their compatriots will go, "Oh, I don't know. I don't even know if she was even real." She was just like an Antifa person in disguise. Um, and then on the JD Vance thing baffles me. It really confuses me because after seeing what almost happened to Mike Pence, why on earth would any rational person agree to be Trump's vice president?
Probably because JD Vance comes with a lot of money attached. And so he probably has a lot more leverage than Pence ever thought of having.
That could be. He's going to ask you to commit crimes, though. And if you don't go along with him, he'll summon up a mob to hang you.
I think that I think JD Vance has proven that he's totally down with that. He's on board.
That it's like agreeing to be one of Bluebeard's wives or something. I mean, you saw what happened before,
Right.
And then I love the fact that Pete Navarro went to prison for 4 months because he refused to cooperate with the January 6th committee. Navarro gets released from prison on the morning of the 17th, then goes straight to the Republican convention to make a speech. And they gave him a huge round of applause before he even said a word.
I mean, it's like, okay, what mobster? I mean, that's like the mob, It's like, oh,
Oh yeah,
okay.
it very very much so. He hasn't even said anything. He approaches the mic, and they're all yelling, "Fight! Fight! Fight!" And then he made a joke about getting a MAGA tattoo in prison. And then here's a direct quote: "If they can come for me, if they can come for Trump, they can come for you." That's the way the law works. Yes, anyone can go to prison if they commit a crime. That's the way it works. Yeah, they're constantly, like, Trump will constantly say, if they can come for me, they can come for you. Yeah, well, yeah, I would expect that. If I did what you did, then I would expect them to come for me. Why would I not expect that?
And don't you think, like, when I look back at, like, the cover, because I've got, I mean, years and years of UFO magazine and different
Sure.
magazines and things, and you go back and you look at the covers of some of things. Well, they're rounding people up in the FEMA camps, and they're doing, A, B, C, and D, and it's like, well, wow, this was quite interesting given the current climate, and, like, I mean, we're people involved in the conspiracy culture desensitizing people so a moment like this could happen.
That's interesting. It's like, when did the purposeful manipulation begin? I mean, you can take it all the way back to the 50s, and in Orange County you had the Birchers, the John Birch Society, and certainly they were using conspiracy theory to promote their anti-communist agenda and all of that. I would say that when QAnon drops in 2017, it's similar to John Birch and all that, but it's morphed into a whole different thing because now you have social media, which is like the X factor that was missing before. And so certainly you can draw parallels between early, like the militia movement in the early 90s, and there was a definite overlap between the militia movement and the same people who were buying UFO magazine might go out and buy like a Jim Keith book, like Black Helicopters Over America. And people, like Jim Keith, kind of like flirted with the right. He would give speeches. When he published a book like Black Helicopters Over America, certainly part of, like, half the audience might have been kind of like libertarian militia types, and the other half might have been, kind of like new agey UFO people. That's kind of like the beginning of that. And though, I would suspect that if Jim Keith was alive today, he might be. Well, I don't know. I didn't know him personally, but I would think that maybe he would be horrified by where it's all gone. You know, um, uh, and also you had, like, in Southern California, you had the something called the Granada Forum. And the Granada Forum, there was a show on KPFK 90.7 FM, which is a Pacifica station, so it's kind of like to the left of NPR, you know. And there was a guy named Roy Tuckman who recently passed away, Roy of Hollywood. He had a show from midnight to 6 a.m. Monday through Thursday,
Oh my
and
lord.
he was like, before Art Bell. He used to play like a bunch of UFO stuff. He was playing early, like, lectures by William Cooper and stuff like that. But he actually stopped at a certain point playing William Cooper because he realized that I don't know, maybe there's something off about this. So he stopped. But he would play like Dave Emery. Like Wednesday nights was conspiracy night. Tuesday night was like alternative health. Thursday night was like philosophy. So he would play like Alan Watts and Terrence McKenna and like people like that. But even then, which I'm talking like the early '90s, he would sometimes play lectures from the Granada Forum. So that was like that weird mixture of blue-haired old ladies afraid of like communists poisoning the water supply with fluoride, and also kind of like young punk rockers, showing up and listening to Lieutenant Bo Greitz, talking about the Jonestown massacre being like a front for MK Ultra experiments, or stuff like that, or like Iran Contra. I remember I attended a Dave Emery lecture once at a library in like Altadena or Pasadena. I can't remember where it was. This was like around '97, and the makeup of the audience, it was this little room in a library, and Dave Emery was there, and he was giving a lecture about George Bush, the George Bush administration, and like overlapping with the evangelical right or something like that. And the people in the audience were like this weird mixture of like punk rock dudes and like leather jackets and old women who look very conservative, and just like aging hippies. So I guess the conspiracy like fringe culture has always attracted like elements from disparate groups of people, disparate, disaffected members of society, and so that's why in Operation Mindfuck I talk about when Hunter S. Thompson ran for sheriff in Aspen. His whole plan was, let's get out all the people who never vote, because if you can get what he called the freak vote, if you can get the freak vote out, maybe I could win. And he almost won. Hunter Thompson lost by like 200 votes or something. So that was like the right idea. And I really think that QAnon, the people who were engineering it behind the scenes, I think they were aware of all of that, and thought, man, like what would happen if not only could you capture the Christian right that voted for George W. Bush, but what if you can capture all these other people who never vote because they're so disaffected or alienated or whatever, and realize that conspiracy theory attracts all these different people, and you can actually get all these people into the same room, and they won't kill each other.
And that's what I've got to ask you, because this is something I was thinking about earlier today. It's like people always, they don't discount Bigelow, but they're not looking at Bigelow for what he's actually doing and what he, how he is influencing politics, the people he's donating to Trump, DeSantis, yada, yada, yada. I mean, you look at Coast to Coast AM, and I know you and I have talked about this in previous shows, but you look at Coast to Coast and you see the same types of things that you've been talking about with the programming. You've got one day it's New Age and Colloidal Silver, and the next day it's rounding up people in FEMA camps, and then we've got Roger Stone or the head of the Oath Keepers, and so we're throwing in this we're creating this environment, and how wonderful that is to create a community and to go in and mine data and to use that data. Hence we've got Steve Bannon and Cambridge Analytica and all of these things, and that to me is like that would be why people would be mining UFO data right there. And I don't understand, I've had arguments with people in, the old guard of ufology and the new guard, whatever guard they are, they're just not guarding the hen house to begin with. But, it's like they discount what people would be doing to mine the data, because they're always equating it with the UFO issue. Oh, they're actually just trying to find ET. And it's like, no, they're freaking not. They're trying to figure out how to manipulate you, to manipulate us. Like, give me a break. And I don't understand why that is why people can't make that connection.
Well, Bigelow was one of the major financial supporters of Ron DeSantis. right?
Yep.
He was one of the major financial backers. And Ron DeSantis, like, he was positioning himself as being more extreme than Trump. Like, that Trump hadn't gone far enough. That was his strategy, is how he was going to get the nomination. I'm going to position myself as I'm more extreme than Trump. And we've seen all the laws in Florida, and all the books that have been just outright banned, and a lot of that goes back to directly to DeSantis. Um, uh, I remember there was an article in the New Yorker, which was very long. It was about, oh God, probably like 10,000 words or more, by Gideon Lewis Krauss. It appeared in 2021, and it was called "How the Pentagon Started Taking UFOs Seriously."
Yes.
And there was like one. It's so long that I could see people getting lost in the weeds or the details. But there's like one particular passage that I pulled out, and I had it out earlier because I was looking at it for a completely different reason. But there's this one passage where it says, in 2007, Robert Bigelow received a letter from a senior official at the Defense Intelligence Agency who was curious about Skinwalker. Bigelow connected him to an old friend from the Nevada desert, Senator Harry Reid, who was then the Senate Majority Leader, and the two men met to discuss their common interest in UFOs. The DIA official later visited Skinwalker, where, from a double-wide observation trailer on site, he is said to have had a spectral encounter. As one Bigelow affiliate described it, he saw a topological figure that appeared in midair and went from pretzel-shaped to Mobius strip-shaped. And then because of that, this guy is convinced, oh wait, there's something relevant here, and then that kind of like unlocks the limitless funds of the special access programs that the DEI and had access to since the passing of the Patriot Act in 2001, right? And then so it says, in the 2008 supplemental appropriations bill, $22 million of so-called black money was set aside for a new program. The Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Applications Program was announced in a public solicitation for bids to examine the future of warfare. The future of warfare. UFOs were not mentioned, but according to Reid, the subtext was clear. Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies was the only bidder. When Bigelow won the government contract, he contacted the same cohort of paranormal investigators he'd worked with at his institute. Other participants were recruited from within the Pentagon's ranks. In 2008, Louis Elizondo was visited by two people who asked him what he thought about UFOs. He replied that he didn't think about them, which was apparently the correct answer, and he was asked to join. And then it said one more paragraph. It says, on October 4th, 2017, at the behest of Christopher Mellon, Leslie Keene was called to a confidential meeting in the bar of an upscale hotel near the Pentagon. She was greeted by Hal Puthoff and Jim Semivan, who introduced her to a sturdy, thick-necked, tattooed man with a clipped goatee named Elizondo. The previous day had been his last day of work at the Pentagon. Over the next 3 hours, Keene was taken through documents that proved the existence of what was, as far as anyone knew, the first government inquiry into UFOs since the close of the Project Blue Book in 1970. So what's interesting about that whole passage is, and it's not really commented on by the writer, but the inherent paradox of leading the guy out to the Skinwalker Ranch. He sees this weird anomaly, which convinces him to unlock the funds for the special access program, convinces them to start the first official investigation of UFOs, supposedly, since Blue Book, and then they go out of their way to tell everybody about it. So in other words, they go out of their way to create the program, and then they go out of their way to whistleblow on the program. And as you know, having read Camilio, the kind of thing that they described here, the topological figure that went from pretzel shape to Mobius strip shape, that the optical camouflage technology can create that kind of effect, So it's just interesting that all this, it seems to be really about the weaponization of space and who can get in on that quicker than anyone else. Who's going to be on the ground floor of that? And we heard last night in the speech, Donald Trump, what did he say? He was going to create an iron dome, a metaphorical iron dome over the United States. essentially Reagan's Star Wars program. So now we've gone back to the 80s. Now we're back into Reagan's Star Wars program. We're going to have to revive Alternative 3 now.
Ugh.
Since we're all reliving the 1980s now, we might as well just bring back Alternative 3.
Yes. And I do have to just like throw in here, like if you Google Bigelow and the Heritage Foundation, well, I will tell you'll get some hits there.
That's interesting. I've never done that, but it sounds like maybe I should.
I would recommend it.
And I remember you told me about the statement of objectives that was prepared by Bass, I guess in 2008, which was for the purpose of soliciting the funds for the DIA, and that it was that went on to state that the contractor, meaning Bass, intended to study the human effects of these breakthrough technologies.
You know what? It's so fascinating to me, and this is why, I mean, like you and I have had, we've known each other through a lot. You've seen obviously my Skinwalker saga and being fed different narratives and watching as my feelings have changed about what's happened and what I once thought for a brief moment that they were actually doing testing at Skinwalker Ranch. Like I can absolutely say they weren't doing anything there. There was nothing. It was just, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm sure there were some interesting things going on with money.
Sure.
But if those guys were testing anything out there, that would be such an insane way to test things. And so my whole thought on that has changed. I mean, what do you think about that now?
Well, it's interesting. It was around the same time that I wrote that 5-part series for Salon about QAnon, which grew into Operation Mindfuck. And you and Chris Marks called me to talk about Camelio. And I recall we spoke for like 2 hours, and it certainly seemed like he read the book. Like he gave me an impression that he was interested in getting the truth out. He told me he saw like a man shapeshift into a wolf on Skinwalker Ranch and all this other strange phenomenon. He said one time he believed they were supernatural, but then he read Camelio and he said he was stunned by the parallels between Damien's experiences and what he experienced. And then he went out of his way to get me booked on this radio show, in Austria, which I've since gone on. I went on there just recently, a few months ago.
Yes, I listened to it. It was great.
And we talked about Chris Marks. And I continue to stay in contact with Chris Marks through email. And in fact, the last time I communicated with him, it was just a few days after January 6th. Then, of course, in September, I think it's September of 2021, he gets doxxed, right? And he's a member of the Oath Keepers, which surprised me. And then to find out that the same time that I was talking to him, you recorded him talking about, shooting left-wing motherfuckers and ranting and raving about wanting to execute Obama and Biden. And I thought, what was the purpose of him wanting to open up lines of communication with me? Why did he go out of his way to like get me booked on this radio show? And I was just wondering, do you think that you were targeted because of the stories you were doing about Skinwalker? I mean, it's not unprecedented. There have been other people who were activists who were actually targeted, and the person targeting them formed a romantic relationship with them for the purpose of keeping tabs on them and spying on them. And there's, I could list examples of that happening. Do you think that that's what was happening?
I mean, it's easy to be. I mean, you could say that I would be paranoid, or I mean, there are all sorts of things. But what I've meticulously done over the years, I'm a great note taker, and so when I talk with people, I am constantly documenting what is being talked about, the people that are coming into my life, and I could definitely see there was a pattern of when I was approached by that group and who approached me, who did what. And then when it was very strange because when I first was introduced to him, it was by a person that I don't even want to mention, but he was and has been active in promoting that narrative for decades, 2 decades. And it was very odd because he called me and just said, hey, I've got this really great guy that he's got all of the reports, the keys to the kingdom, and I can't interview him, but I'd love to introduce you to him. And I remember just thinking, okay, this is very odd because this guy is always in the limelight, and he would never in a million years give anybody else the chance to get to one up him. But it was just one of those. And before that, I've got to backtrack. Before that, I was sent a majority of the reports from the security guards by Chris O'Brien. So there was Chris O'Brien sending information, and then all of a sudden, here is this person in my life, and whether he was just somebody that was a kind of a lone wolf type person that was just wanting to stay relevant in that scene, or whether there was a concerted effort, like I will probably never know. But I will say it has been very interesting to watch the lack of consequences that my ex has had, not only in the National Guard, but with law enforcement. And it is there are some questions that I have, and I think that it's been interesting to talk to people who aren't even involved in this at all, that are just normal everyday people that are astute business people. And you go over the pattern of events, and some of them will just sit back and go, huh. Isn't that interesting?
Well,
So whether there's something to it, I don't know, but there's certainly a lot of strange occurrences that have happened.
well, uh, the watching what happened, to you dealing with this situation, to me, it almost ties back to something we were talking about earlier, which is the cognitive dissonance on the extreme right, and that is the Utah National Guard. It seemed like they kind of closed ranks around
Hmm.
Chris, right?
Yes.
Even though he threatened his fellow soldiers, he violated protective orders. Uh, I think he failed to appear in court,
Multiple
right?
times. Yes.
And law enforcement just like turned a blind eye. Um, that now keep this in mind. This is the quote woke military that Trump and these people were complaining about for the past 4 days at the national convention. It's just overrun with these woke people, and meanwhile, you can't even get. I mean, these people immediately close the ranks around Chris. It's a total difference between practice, theory and practice, reality and propaganda. And this is a real world example of it. So I think that your situation is like a microcosm of, on one hand, they're saying, oh, well, the military is like, it's filled with these communist left-wing socialists who've completely, the woke mind virus has completely decimated us, and now we're laid bare to our enemies. Um, Something like Pat Buchanan would have said back in the 80s. And but here in you, we have an actual real world example of what happens. There's no, where's the wokeness in your story and your situation? All we have is a guy who's secretly a member of the Oath Keepers, who is allowed to constantly break the law and put other people's lives in danger until finally something is done, basically until the point where they couldn't ignore it anymore. It sounds like.
and
Um,
I will say, as I mean, it's like if I hadn't have put on my boots and constantly fought
right.
against to get my story because there was a certain detective that was taking his side, and that was, I mean, the whole thing has just been a freaking nightmare. And I received, and I don't know if I told you this, but I was doing records requests with the Salt Lake City Police Department because I was told by the detective who had seen the videos I recorded of Mr. Marks beating me in the head multiple times on multiple occasions. And I was told by this detective that he didn't believe me. And so when I started doing records requests, and I was getting more and more information and finding more and more holes in specific stories, I got a letter right before I went to the State Records Committee, a 12-page letter by the Salt Lake attorney, and they were telling me that basically if I proceeded to go forward, that they would, Chris had accused me of domestic abuse, and it could go either way, and they could charge me with domestic abuse and all of these things, and it would just have a chilling effect if they were to release what actually happened. And so I was kind of absolutely traumatized and stopped dead in my tracks, and I did not go to the State Records Committee, which I regret doing. But I was definitely, again, like bullied by people that were supposed to be protecting me. And
Did he just come out and say, "I don't believe you"?
oh yeah,
Wow.
oh yeah. I mean, I remember sitting after I had, he was the only detective that I had been working with. I sat and I recorded when I had initially made the first reports that I had been abused, and Chris had come back to the apartment, and I recorded him talking to the detective and saying, well, now I've turned to God now, and you're going to write this down in your report, right? And the detective, oh yeah, yeah. And then another video of him saying, well, I talked to the detective and smooth things over, so you better listen to how things are going to roll out, or I'm going to kill you. I mean,
Wow.
so it was interesting. And then this detective was more and more dismissive with me, and eventually saw this video of me literally, and I don't know, I briefly posted it on Twitter, but it was of Chris coming towards me and beating me in the head with a closed fist multiple times in the jaw until I was on the floor. And that happened multiple times. And I remember talking to the detective one day, and I was sitting down, on the floor, and I'll never forget that, and just hearing him say, I've watched the videos and I believe him. And I talked to the detective's partner, and the detective's partner just said, I saw the same video. I was there with a detective. We both agreed it was abuse. And then all of a sudden, I get this, and then all of a sudden, he's stalking me multiple times out in front of my family's homes, in my business. He was actually came to my business 5 months in a row without me knowing. In the business, you can walk into my business because we share the same bathroom.
Right.
And so
Right.
I had presented that, nothing. And it was just like, oh my God, and I know that there's a lack of response for domestic abuse victims, but it was just insane to see, okay, here you've got this. Okay, here you've got Mr. Marks at the National Guard doing at Camp Williams using firearms with 2 protective orders. And then everybody closing ranks, and all of a sudden the Bluffdale police officer who took the report disappeared and was out of town. And they prolonged the case long enough for 2 years that his whole National Guard troop deployed to Africa, and so they had to dismiss the case.
So see, that's interesting. So I mean, they had to actually go out of their way. They were actually dragging their feet so that he would leave the country, and then there wouldn't be enough time. I mean, that
So
was on purpose.
the National Guard, yep, they dragged it out and dragged it out, and then all of a sudden, whoops, nobody's here. All the, hundreds of
That's
people that
amazing.
could, testify, they're gone. I mean, it was just like it's been like watching a train wreck in slow motion night after night. And just watching the way that even the court in the last Fox 13 news piece, the way that the judge, looked at Chris and just said, well, now, if you do anything wrong, it's going to look really bad for me. So you better be good. And this is after he'd, abused another person.
Right.
And it's just, you just think, oh my God. I mean, it's been really interesting. And it is interesting to know that, you were there for a portion of it. You were contacted by Chris, and there was definitely a narrative that was being woven by not only Chris, but by his partner at the ranch, Chris Bartell. So they were
Right.
both very vested in making sure that that narrative they were trying to spin was put out to the public.
And what's fascinating about that is, look how difficult it was for you in this situation, and you had all this concrete evidence. So imagine what it's like for someone who does not have any videotapes or anything recorded. That's really incredible.
And that really, I mean, it's heartbreaking to me to know that, it's like I do have all of this evidence. I have decades of evidence, of him abusing former partners and new partners and threatening people at the, in Democratic chairs and different people in political positions of power. And it's just like, oh my gosh. But it's nobody wants to do anything about it. And why didn't people want to do something about it? Was it because a certain person didn't do their job at a lower level? Was there a broader conspiracy that the National Guard needed to be covered? And at what point did that tarnish the people at Skinwalker Ranch? It's just, I mean, these are questions that I will never have the answers to, but it's definitely makes you wonder. And I am very proud at the end of the day, and that I could continue to kind of shine a spotlight on that. And I'm really grateful that you have done that as well on my behalf.
I did write about it in the Silent Civil War article that I published in the Evergreen Review this past December, since it seems so emblematic of the entire MAGA movement. You know, um, in that same doxing incident where Chris Marks was revealed to be an oath keeper, the other people were also doxxed in that same incident, including the sheriff of Riverside County, Chad Bianco. Uh, he was also revealed to be an oath keeper, and he claimed that he didn't remember joining.
Convenience.
And he said that he didn't know what the Oath Keepers were, but they were not a terrorist group. So he didn't
Ah,
remember joining. He didn't know what they were, and they were not a terrorist group. So
okay.
somehow he knew that, even though he didn't know what they were. And there was also a bunch of cops in the New York Police Department as well who were revealed to be Oath Keepers in that same doxing incident. A lot of people involved in incident management and riot control, which is
Comforting.
interesting. Very comforting. And in fact, Ron DeSantis, who we just mentioned, was being funded by
Hmm.
Bigelow, DeSantis provided one of my favorite quotes from the Republican convention on the second night on Tuesday. He said, quote, "We support law and order, not riots and disorder."
Oh,
Everyone burst into applause and cheers. That was quite. I once heard Paul Krasner, who was the editor of The Realist, and who I spoke to one time, and he actually came to a lecture that I gave at the Midnight Special Bookstore in Santa Monica, which is now sadly long gone. But Paul Krasner, who was a stand-up comedian and a writer, wrote one of my favorite autobiographies, Confessions of a Raving Unconfined Nut, which that quote comes from a J. Edgar Hoover FBI file on Paul Krasner. J. Edgar Hoover in the file called Krasner a raving unconfined nut, so he called the book Confessions of a Raving Unconfined Nut. I once talked to Paul Krasner he said to me that he really enjoyed my lecture, which was about conspiracy theories. And he said what impressed him was that I seemed to have a sense of humor. And he said that was not usually the case with most people he knew who were into conspiracies. And Krasner said that I once heard him say that when he would see something on the news that was so unbelievable he couldn't even fathom it. For example, like when Bob Dylan came out and said he was a born again Christian, or seeing Michael Jackson with his one gloved hand shaking Nancy Reagan's hand. Paul Krasner had a method he developed to determine whether or not he was dreaming. He would just take his arms and flap it really fast. And if he flew, that meant he was dreaming. If he stayed stationary, he was not dreaming, and it was actually happening. So there were several moments like these during the Republican convention, and that Ron DeSantis quote was one of them. I had to start flapping my arms in the air, and I did not fly. So I thought, okay, I'm not dreaming. Another amazing thing was for the first time, the head of the Teamsters spoke at the RNC. The first time for the entire 120 years that the Teamsters Union has existed. Apparently, the White House is really pissed about this.
I bet.
At the beginning of the speech, he threw the crowd some red meat. He was like, "Trump can take a bullet to the skull and get back up," etc. And they all roared and cheered. And then about halfway through the speech, he starts saying things like, "The corporate elites are unable to cheat us out of our well-earned wages because unions hold their feet over the fire." And suddenly the applause became muted. So at first it was like, kind of like, oh man, Trump, fight, fight, fight. And then he started talking about the corporate elites and the workers having rights. And then suddenly you can hear everyone kind of like, wait a minute, what? And then now this is fascinating. Monica Crowley, who's she was the assistant secretary of the Treasury for Public Affairs under Trump's administration. On the 18th, so on the last day of the convention, she said something that was fascinating. She said the bond that Trump supporters have with him is not ideological, it's not political, it's emotional. And of course, she's absolutely right about that. And then right after that, I saw a young military guy being interviewed. The guy's name was Chris, and he was one of the delegates. And with tears in his eyes, this veteran says, "Trump never served in the military, but he's a soldier just like me."
Oh.
And tears were streaming down his cheeks as he said this.
And that breaks my heart. I mean,
it does. Really,
it's just like, here is a guy that did everything he could to get out of serving, and yet people
absolutely.
who do are, and they're risking their lives are. It's amazing. And I've got to just say too, like with the Secret Service, I mean, you watched that group of people closing ranks and using their bodies as a human shield, and look at what they've had to endure.
Oh yeah, then they complained that they were women.
Right.
That was their first complaint.
Trump up there trying to raise his arm and make sure that he could get the photo shot, so everybody could see him, and all the while putting everybody around him, the team trying to protect him, in danger.
Well, right, and then all of his supporters say, "Well, this is a DEI thing. It's right. Those women, they shouldn't have allowed him to do that." It was his choice to do that, and they're blaming the Secret Service agents. So anyway, so after I saw Dracula, the next morning, I came home and watched the parts of the speech that I'd missed, and it was quite amazing when he starts talking. Did you watch the whole speech?
I've only been able to watch, I think I've watched maybe 40 minutes of it. Maybe tonight I'll have a margarita and watch the rest of it.
Just like slam a needle into your vein and then watch it. So he starts talking about, he says, "Okay, I know you all want me to talk about the assassination attempt. You won't be hearing me talk about it again after this because it's too painful." And then he proceeds to go into like a pornographic detail about everything that happened. Everything we already saw on the television screen, and then he begins the story with, "It was a warm summer day, like 1,000 years ago, 5 days ago, a warm summer day." Then he starts going into like extreme detail about the blood coming out of the ear, and the doctor told him how the ear causes more blood to
Mhm.
flow than any other part of the body, and then he says, "Well, we learned something." Um, and then it was like really weird when he starts kissing the fireman's helmet,
Right.
just like making out with the helmet. That was very bizarre. Uh,
That was very surreal, and I think too, it's like it just the way he spoke about that moment was just another example of his narcissistic,
oh yeah.
behavior, because it's like not a thank you to all the men and women that rushed in to put their
Oh
bodies in front of
no.
him. Nothing about them, but
Yeah,
he's more
no.
than willing to let his, whatever his media team run with that, and try to out all of them, and things, which I think is really despicable. I certainly wouldn't do that to my security team, but
It was the whole thing was, I mean, talking about the Iron Dome over the country, and um, there's one point where he said something interesting. I think that this is a true statement. He said, under President Trump, and I love it when he refers to himself in the third person. Uh, Under President Trump, Russia took nothing, and that leads me to a book recommendation. Because there's a book that Jonathan Vankin wrote that I highly recommend. It's called Close to Zero, and the subtitle is How Donald Trump Fulfilled His Apocalyptic Vision and Paid His Debt to Putin with a Devastating Biological Warfare Attack on America. Now, I suspect that a lot of people maybe have not read the book because maybe the subtitle just sounds like too flamboyant, or it could be that they think that the thesis of the book is that Putin and Donald Trump, like a pair of mad scientists, were in a laboratory creating COVID. You know, that is not the point of the book. The point of the book is that what he claims is, and it's extremely well written. It's very clear. It's very logical. Every single assertion is backed up by hundreds of notes in the back of the book. Vankin is claiming that basically Putin and Trump used the chaos of COVID, or tried to use it to their advantage. And he lays out all these quotes, these times in the past where Trump has said, I thrive when everything else is in chaos. When everyone else is in pain, I I get wealthy. Um, and and specific examples of that, like in his career. And so Vankin's thesis is that when COVID hit, Trump thought, this is an opportunity for me. And so he goes through all this evidence to show that Trump, is purposely trying to make this as bad as possible. He's not trying to help anyone. He's purposely dragging his feet at every single step to drag this out. And you should have Vankin on the show. You should interview him.
okay.
And definitely take a look at the book, Close to Zero. So when Trump says under President Trump, Russia took nothing, that could very well be. You could definitely argue that it has a whole different meaning after you've read Close to Zero, though.
Okay.
For some reason, one of the lines that got the biggest applause was, "We will not have men playing in women's sports." That just the whole arena burst into applause at that. I thought when Melania came in at the beginning, she was wearing this like crimson dress, and she's slowly like strutting down this long red corridor, and it looked like a scene out of Dario Argento's Suspiria, the 1970s horror film. And then at the end, Melania like comes up behind him, and Trump seems genuinely surprised that she's on stage with him. And then he goes in to kiss her on the lips, and she turns her face away. It was like a really weird moment. He goes in to kiss her, and she just like turns away and just like hugs him. And then it was kind of like weird and awkward.
Yes,
I don't know. Did you notice that,
I
or
did.
I just,
I did. And
uh,
I mean, honestly, if I had a husband that was having an affair with somebody that was broadcast all over the world when I was pregnant, I mean, I might feel the same way, multiple affairs, but at the end of the day, though, she probably did know what she was getting into. But I mean, that I can't imagine being in that situation and seeing, the release of certain things with Epstein files, which have
Sure.
gotten nothing in the media, of course,
No,
about any of that. But
I do think that was one of the motivating factors behind starting QAnon in October of 2017. That I think that the Epstein story was rapidly unraveling, and the idea was throw out as much chaos as possible to distract from that and from Trump's connection to Epstein. So instead of Trump being the pedophile hanging out with another pedophile, instead you flip it so that Trump is the guy who's trying to put away all the pedophiles. He's the one who's trying to put all these people into Gitmo.
mm-hmm.
And I really think that was one of the main reasons why QAnon was initiated in the first place, was this total disinformation to combat all the stuff that was going to come out as a result of Epstein.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, it was a way to combat all that, to get out in front of it, throw out as much lies as possible so that no one can figure out what the truth is, and that's been very successful, of course. I think speaking of QAnon, which I guess in a way we've been talking about it the entire time, but back in May, USA Today published an article called "As Trump Campaigns, He's Spreading QAnon Posts Anew." Some call that playing with fire, and so it's interesting that QAnon's kind of like floated into the background, but it's still there. It's always there. And in this article, it says, as Donald Trump heads toward a November rematch election against Joe Biden, his online posts are reinvigorating a key element of his support from years past, the conspiracy theory known as QAnon. While QAnon largely faded from the spotlight after Trump left office, he has newly amplified the ideas on his social media platform, Truth Social. Since the site launched 2 years ago, Trump has reposted or promoted QAnon-affiliated accounts more than 800 times, ensuring their messages will be widely seen, according to a new study from watchdog group Media Matters, shared exclusively with USA Today. Experts say the support amounts to a tacit endorsement of a dangerous movement that has been linked to criminal acts ranging from the January 6th Capitol riot to isolated cases of violence and even murder. The Trump campaign did not respond to requests for comment about QAnon. While he was president, Trump spoke favorably of the movement, and today he encourages QAnon chants and plays a song associated with QAnon at rallies. And then that was published on May 23rd. Just 2 days earlier, in the Financial Times, there was an article called "Trial of German Plotters Lifts Curtain on QAnon-Style Conspiracy." This is fascinating because I know before the Salon articles about QAnon, I had tried to pitch a different article about QAnon to a magazine that's based in England, and they responded, "Oh, QAnon, that's kind of an American thing. Like, we don't really."
Right.
and they didn't realize, obviously, that no, it's a worldwide thing. And so here's a passage from this article from the Financial Times. It says 9 men and women went on trial in Frankfurt on Tuesday, accused of plotting to overthrow the German government in the sensational case that has revealed how deeply QAnon conspiracy theories have penetrated the world of the country's far right. The suspects, who were arrested in December 2022, stand accused of belonging to or supporting a terrorist organization that planned to attack the German parliament, detain MPs, and do away with the country's post-war political order. They face 10 to 15 years in prison if found guilty. Prosecutors have identified the ringleaders as Heinrich Prince Raus, a real estate broker and scion of an aristocratic family, and Rudiger von Pestekor, a former lieutenant colonel and paratrooper commander. This group also includes a former MP from the far-right Alternative for Germany party, ex-judge Birgit Malsock-Winkman. Prosecutor Tobias Engelstetter spent most of the first day of the trial reading out the 617-page indictment detailing a conspiracy that seemed so outlandish at times it drew gasps of astonishment from the public gallery. Prosecutors said the conspirators shared a profound rejection of the country's liberal democratic system, believed deeply in the QAnon conspiracy, and shared the views of the Reichsbürger movement, which does not recognize Germany's post-war order. Engelstetter presented the plotters' worldview as being built around the idea that Germany is controlled by members of a deep state, which runs a series of underground military bases. Here, children are abused, killed, and their bodies used to produce a special rejuvenating elixir. According to this theory, the deep state is opposed by a secret association known as the Alliance, which brings together the armies, governments, and intelligence services of various states, including the US and Russia, that have promised to liberate Germany. So this is fascinating. I mean, this has gotten no play in the United States, but this is evidence of that QAnon is not just an American Trump-centric movement. It's spread to other countries.
It absolutely has, and I remember seeing that on the news when that broke, and they did the raids and they arrested everybody. And it is really interesting to me, and I want to get your opinion about this, to see figures like Lou Elizondo going to different countries that have far right leaders, and what is the role of some of these figureheads in ufology to not only find people that are willing to be recruited, in my opinion, and then kind of promoting this rhetoric. We've got to, like the Jeremy Corbell kind of thing, we've got to light the torches because we're taking on the man. We're gonna it's the same type of rhetoric, and it's like what is going on here, and how do we not understand there are different ways that people are. It's like a gateway. Do you think that UFOs and conspiracies are gateways to other more problematic things? I certainly do, but
Well, certainly they can be. I mean, I don't think they're inherently that, but as I map out in Operation Mindfuck, you can see how it can definitely be used and manipulated to do that to people. I mean, and it's fascinating how I mean, just in the past 4 days, or 5 days, we've heard about left wingers need to tone down their language of violence, but meanwhile, I mean, I've experienced this myself. Like I mentioned earlier that I published on Salon. I published an article about QAnon's weirdest obsession, which was all about recent attacks on Freemasons, right?
right.
And certainly demonizing Freemasons is not new. I mean, that's not like something that QAnon invented, but and goes back hundreds of years. But certainly there's a revival of that now, and so the main purpose of the piece was just kind of like shine a spotlight on these increasing incidents of right-wing assaults on these Masonic lodges. 3 days after the article was published, something really weird happened. A reader sent me a link to the king of all kooky QAnon websites, which is worldcrimesyndicate.blogspot.com. And I see here, they sent me the link to this page where under the heading Cargill Macmillan Masons, you see a series of photographs of these old, white men dressed in expensive clothes who look like they might conceivably be millionaires, or at least or billionaires, or successful business people, perhaps. Then if you scroll down the page just a little bit, you'll see a photo of me taken from my own website, where I'm wearing a bright blue Spy versus Spy t-shirt with a goofy expression on my face, and I'm holding up a copy of Camilio. And according to this blogger, I'm a billionaire, as well as a high-ranking member of an evil world crime syndicate backed by the Freemasons.
Nice.
And I've concluded that one of my fellow criminals is getting my cut of the proceeds, because I still have to get up every morning and go to work. So here's a direct quote from the blog. Quote, "The propagandist author Robert Guffey is a Scottish Rite Freemason and agent of deception of these Scottish American billionaire clans. The Macmillans of Scotland founded Macmillan Publishing, which publishes books for educational propaganda. Another Scottish family, the Collins, are publishers with their HarperCollins, which is now owned by News Corp and the billionaire Rupert Murdoch. The Murdochs are of Scottish ancestry, and they are managers of the Scottish Rite in the United States. Robert Guffey is a Scottish Rite Freemason from California who specializes in architecting gang stalking and selling books about him gang stalking a guy who he claims is his friend in the book. Guffey also spreads military propaganda, and he is a brainwasher. So,
Oh,
so with all these ties to the New York publishing industry, I'm surprised I, haven't received a sweetheart deal from Rupert Murdoch, my fellow
dang.
Scottish Rite Freemason. Um, I don't even know if Rupert Murdoch is Scottish Rite Freemason, but according to this guy, he is. And it's judging by the date of the post, which is August 16th. So that's like 3 days after the article was published. This guy he like some digital warrior, and he probably has his phone like set to Masonic mode or something. And so this article like popped up, and he immediately like sees, oh, he's a Freemason. Guffey, that's a Scottish name. He must be one of these Scottish Rite billionaires. And
Wow.
I might use this as a blurb, like on the back of my next book. But the scary thing, I mean, it's goofy on one hand, but then the scary part of it is obviously the purpose of the blog post is to like galvanize any random asshole with a bent brain to attack me either online or physically, and it's not a lot. It's not at all unlike the terrorism that's indulged in by Trump himself, who, these trolls have like learned from the words and actions of the reality TV star they worship. And as according to this ABC News poll, a substantial subset of people arrested in connection with the January 6th Capitol riots were active or retired military, law enforcement, or government service employees. An NPR analysis has found that nearly 1 in 5 people charged over their alleged involvement in the attack on the U.S. Capitol appear to have a military history. And if Trump comes back in, he's going to pardon all those people. And it's just it's so to answer your question, yes, conspiracy theory can definitely be used. It can be weaponized and used to basically, instead of worrying about the people who really are the problem, well, I'm going to get you worried about this guy, this Freemason in Southern California who's a billionaire, but is also teaching full time at a state university, which is not the best method to become a billionaire. I assure you.
But I mean, and that is the scary thing. You see, people are going to great lengths. Like you look at what happened with Nancy Pelosi's husband. I mean, people are going to great lengths if something is even put out there on the internet to create, this. Oh my gosh, he's involved in MK Ultra, or he's involved in this conspiracy, and he's actually A, B, C, or D, and people are latching onto that and running with these narratives, and it is concerning, especially now that everything is in such a heightened state. So I look at, I know for me, I've definitely had some strange things happen, and I do worry about that sort of thing, and I know that other people do as well on a much grander scale. People that are judges, the people that are trying to keep other people safe. I mean, just you can't. I mean, everybody is a target now that goes against a certain person.
It's one of the. I really think there's a connective tissue that connects Camelio and Operation Mindfuck. First of all, they're published by the same publisher, but also the thing that connects them is Camelio is all about one guy being targeted. Operation Mindfuck is about how now we're all targeted.
Right.
And what used to happen, like the stuff that's happening to Damien and Camelio, which is very face-to-face physical surveillance and harassment, by the time you get to Operation Mindfuck in 2017, when QAnon appears, that's become what they call digital warriors, which is a phrase that was copyrighted by Michael Flynn, by the way. He came up with that phrase. The digital warriors they can basically gang stalk you online. So they don't even have any skin in the game, you know. Of course, they do it in person too, like when the guy took the gun and shot up the pizza place in D.C., or the guy who attacked Nancy Pelosi's husband, and immediately on Newsmax, Greg Kelly said, implied, he often uses like QAnon kind of language, but he never mentions QAnon. He immediately went on the air and implied that the guy who attacked Nancy Pelosi, it had nothing to do. He was not a far right wing ideologue. In fact, he was a male prostitute, and this was some kind of illicit, salacious experience that had gone south, and that's why the guy attacked. And then when that didn't work, they said, "Oh, well, actually, he's a left winger. He's a crazy left winger," which is what they tried to say about the guy who shot at Trump, even though he's a registered Republican. And all of his classmates say that whenever they had debates, he was the only guy in the room who would go up there and take the conservative position. Why he was targeting Trump there's a lot of confusing stuff in that. It'll be interesting to see what more information comes out about all that as the weeks unfold. But
Right.
immediately they tried to say that the guy who attacked Nancy Pelosi he was a left winger, you know. um, but
Well,
they were,
no.
yeah, no. And I don't know if you heard about this, but in January of this year, there was a guy in Pennsylvania named Justin Mohn, Mohn. He decapitated his father because he believed his dad was working with the cabal of satanic Democrats to take over the earth. This guy, Justin, recorded a 14-minute video of him holding up his father's head in a plastic bag while he delivered a diatribe about America's coming bloody revolution. He posted the video online, declaring it to be a call to arms for American patriots. The video included rants directed against far-left woke mobs, migrants, the LGBT community, Black Lives Matter, and Joe Biden, calling for the public execution of an entire slew of federal agents, including FBI agents, IRS employees, U.S. Marshals, federal judges, and border control officers, all of whom he considered to be traitors to the United States. That's just one incident like this. And of course, um, I mean, this guy's father is just like one victim in a rash of threats, assaults, bombings, attempted killings, just outright murders that have occurred in the wake of MAGA and QAnon. And they're telling the left that they need to tone it down.
I know. I mean, this is just absolutely amazing to me. I, my mind is just blown, and I think it's sad and it's pathetic. And I think I'm to the point where I'm, I know I've got friends and family that I love dearly, like I was mentioning, that are buying this, but there comes a point in time when it's like, if you can't take, 5 minutes, 10 minutes out of your day to do some research and to understand that, you need to actually do research, that what the media is presenting is definitely, it's askew right at the moment, and you have an obligation as a citizen to do your homework and understand that we're in a time where we are, women's rights, people, I mean, there's so many things that are at stake. Our
This is
country,
not just, yeah, it's not just a casual political divide about some sort of ancillary topic. It's far more crucial than that. And Stephen King wrote an op-ed piece back in 2020 where he said, you know what, I get it. I understand why in 2016 some of my friends voted for Trump. He goes, I too sometimes have the instinct of wanting to topple over the wheelbarrow, just to kick the wheelbarrow over to see what happens. And so he was describing that as like the impulse behind voting for Trump in 2016. That there was a certain unknown factor there, an X on the edge of the map. You weren't quite sure what direction this guy was going to go in. You couldn't be certain of it because, of course, he had no actual political history. And so Stephen King said, "Look, I can understand rolling the dice on this guy in 2016." He goes, "But now it's 4 years later. We know who this guy is. You can't claim not to know anymore." You can't claim ignorance. You can't claim, oh, well, I didn't know because he didn't have much of a political history. I didn't know. Now it's very clear who he is. So if you're casting a vote for him now at this point, there, I mean, I don't know if ignorance or naivete is an appropriate excuse.
You know what? I'm getting to the point where no, it's not. If you can't take when when you clearly can hear, you can see what's going on. I mean, we have never been. I mean, in modern history, we've never been so polarized and so well. Maybe I'm being dramatic, but I really don't think that we've been in a situation where we've been, um, where we've been. I don't think I don't know. Help me out here because I think about everything that's taking place right now, and it just really is a unique time in history, and it is frightening to see how many things are being taken away right in front of us, and yet people aren't doing their job. I mean, I will dare say that the Democrats have been sleeping on the job for how long? I mean, people just don't have a freaking clue what's at stake, and it's time for us to wake up and do the research and take responsibility. And I also have to say that the people in the UFO community, I have respect for not even 1% of them, because I'm watching what they're putting forward, and they're just parroting all of this rhetoric. This just crap. And I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting, and I'm so happy to know somebody like you who's doing the research and speaking out about all of this. And I think we just need to keep doing more of that. But what do you think? Spin your little magic 8-ball. What do you think is going to be coming down the pipe for us?
It's interesting. The question is, are we more polarized now than we were, say, in the late 60s, early 70s? That's an interesting question. I don't know exactly how to measure that. I was born in 1972. Certainly, I've read a lot about that era, and it seems now, because of that, of the introduction of the internet and social media, I think the political divide that was there during the Vietnam War era has been amped up. If not to 11, then maybe to 13 and 16, 17. And I mean, when you have, I mentioned Michael Flynn earlier, and it'll be interesting to see what role he plays if there's a second Trump administration, because I do think he's a major factor behind QAnon, him and his son. Flynn, in fact, there's a new documentary out called Flynn that's all praising Flynn, and it came out like just before the Republican convention started, which I thought was weird timing. But he's been going around in this Reawaken America tour, which he and this guy Clay Clark, I think, started, and they've been going around speaking at churches all around the country, and it's just like a series of insane. I mean, this guy Clay Clark claims that the COVID vaccine has bits of Epstein's DNA in it mixed with Marina Abramovich. Her DNA is mixed in it as well. So if you took the COVID vaccine, you have a bit of Epstein's DNA in you, and they've said, oh, if you were stupid and you took the vaccine, then you have to repent, pray to God. And it's madness. And Michael Flynn said in San Diego in March of 2022, he said at a Reawaken America tour event, he said, we need you, talking to the people in the audience, we need you to charge the machine gun nest. Maybe I'm just asking you to dig a little bit deeper there, or hold this side of the line, or form up, because we're going to counterattack over here. And that counterattack is we're going to go after school boards. So that was 2022. And then we see that happen. I mean, that's one of the reasons I wrote Operation Mindfuck, was to show, okay, you hear these fringy, insane QAnon people say something on their little podcast, and then you'll see it erupt in the real world a few weeks later. So I was trying to establish a timeline to show, like, look, there's like a real world effect here. It's no longer just these are nuts in their mom's basement with their little podcast empire. No, like what they're saying is having a real world effect. And you see this here with this comment. Michael, by the way, Biden was criticized for simply using the word crosshairs. Here's Michael Flynn using just full on military language back in 2022 to describe exactly what they were going to do. And you can decide for yourself whether he was being metaphorical when he said, we need you to charge the machine gun nest. But when he says, the counterattack is we're going to go after school boards, that was March of 2022. We've seen that play out in the real world. We've seen it play out in Florida, and now you have, what you're gonna have to show your ID at a library. It's like getting a bottle of alcohol. You have to prove you're over 18 to like check out a Toni Morrison book. I mean, it's like really, it's insane, and that kind of thing is, I think, really unique to this particular point in time. I mean, you didn't have Reawaken America tours, even back during the Vietnam War era, though you did have John Birchers and things like that. I just think that through the internet and social media, what the John Birchers could have done back in the late 60s, that's been amplified. And so these people are even more effective now than they would have been back then. And when I appeared on Mark Maron's WTF podcast back, it was July 4th of last year, near the end of the interview, he said to me, so you're not too optimistic then? And I had to say, well, yeah, I guess so. I guess I'm not really that optimistic. No. There's you get to a point where you kind of adopt a bit of a existentialist point of view. You have to have something of a sense of humor about it, maybe a gallows, dark sense of humor. But in terms of, I was saying ever since Biden won, I wrote a long piece for the Evergreen Review about QAnon called "If you're into eating children's brains, you've got a 4-year free ride." And the whole point of the article was to say this QAnon thing's not dead. I mean, it may go in abeyance, or they may go underground. They may call themselves something else, but this thing is still like really active. And I continue to write articles for Salon and the Evergreen Review, The Silent Civil War, and other pieces. And sometimes the attitude I get from like my left-wing friends is like, why are you even writing about this? Trump's dead. He's not coming back. you know and I just sort of shook my head in disbelief, thinking, is it possible that they're this naive? Well, yes, it is possible. And I do think that social media creates these bubbles that people put themselves in, and they're not aware. They only talk to their left-wing friends. They don't look at right-wing media, so they don't know what's going on. When I wrote the Salon piece about, I wrote this piece called QAnon 2.0, which was all about the Sound of Freedom, the movie that came out and knocked Indiana Jones out of the first place spot on July 4th weekend. I sent the link to one of the people who works at Or Books, and she said she read the article and she said, "Wow, it was really amazing reading that." She said, I'd never heard of The Sound of Freedom," which it was the #1 movie in America. There were articles about it everywhere about how this right wing kind of weird QAnon MAGA movie just came out of nowhere and pushed Indiana Jones out of the way. And I really think that there's this kind of that kind of, it's not just right wingers who put themselves into a solipsistic bubble and don't talk to anyone else, and so I think to a lot of my left wing friends, this has come as a surprise. They're like shocked that Trump is getting the nomination, when I was saying in these articles that it was almost inevitable.
Absolutely. And I've got to just say, The Sound of Freedom that hits close to home, unfortunately, because Tim Ballard is a Utah native, and the Utah Attorney General, Sean Reyes, who we've done pieces about. We've done FOIA requests, grammar requests about the Utah Attorney General Sean Reyes. I mean, they were right there together, going to these foreign countries and creating their characters, their fictional characters that they were, proclaiming were actually real, and doing all sorts of things. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But that's close ties to you. Well, it is in Utah, so quite interesting.
Sure. Steve Snyder did a pretty good show on The Farm about the Sound of Freedom. He had J.G. Michael on, who hosts the Parallax View. And I think he was interviewing two people. I think it was J.G. Michael who said this. He said they should do a sequel to Sound of Freedom that's all about these freedom fighters coming into the exotic land of Utah from some other foreign country and rescuing the children who are being molested by the Mormon Church.
Oh, well,
but I don't think you're going to see that movie though, because
no, probably not.
There's a weird theme in Sound of Freedom, which is this kind of odd subliminal, like demonizing immigrants.
Absolutely.
And I covered that in the Salon piece, which is called QAnon 2.0. And very much using this idea that sex trafficking is something that, well, we heard Trump saying it last night. The sex traffickers are pouring in over the border. There was a great article I posted on my blog, cryptoschatology.com, that was all about. They went out and interviewed people who actually live along the border, and they were saying the only invasion we see is like all these MAGA people who are coming here. They've been causing more chaos, and there are some of these groups who actually I mentioned this in the article, in the QAnon 2.0 article, that this one guy who brags about actually planting mines under they hide them there so that the immigrants coming over the border will actually step on these mines.
Oh my God.
It's really incredible. And they've created these like crazy QAnon conspiracy theories about this like butterfly preservation center that's located along the border actually being a front for some child sex trafficking ring, and the people who work there have been harassed, and people attacking them in their cars, and just really craziness. It's in the article, QAnon 2.0. Like look that up on Salon.
Yeah, no, you've done some great work. I mean, I just am looking at all of the stuff that you've done on Salon, and it's just, from decoding QAnon, from Pizzagate to Kanye to Marina. This conspiracy covers everything, and then making sense of QAnon, what lies behind the conspiracy that's eating America. I mean, just you've done such great work, and it's not to write about QAnon is definitely not an easy task, because like you saw that person that popped up and created a fictional narrative about you. I mean, these are definitely some unhinged people, and that is really frightening that's taking place at the border when everybody is saying that so many people are coming through this, coming to our country, and it's just a sad time. And I think the Republican National Convention, seeing people holding up signs talking about rounding people up, it's mind-numbing.
Oh yeah. Oh, at a certain point you don't even know what to say. But what all you can do is keep telling the truth, and trying to. I've been trying to, when I go on a podcast, I try to go on podcasts where people might hear me who would not necessarily be hearing this kind of point of view. I mean, I when I wrote Camelio, I mean, there's a certain group of people who know that book, and they're into conspiracies, they're into high strangeness, they're into the paranormal, even UFOs are kind of like adjacent subject matter to that. Cryptoschatology is all about conspiracies, certainly. So, I'm my intent in writing the Salon series, and then in writing Operation Mindfuck, was just that. Well, if publishing those 5 articles on Salon in 2020, if that prevented like even just one person from not going to the Capitol on January 6th, then maybe that was worth it. But that's I don't have I don't have my hopes set like really high about being able to persuade a mass group of people, but if you can just reach one or two, then I think that was probably worth it.
And I love that, because I know sometimes, Jack and I have conversations about this. It's like, what exactly are we doing again? And, I mean, I think for me, at the end of the day, it's the same thing, even with the domestic abuse stuff. It's like, why have I gone to great lengths to make sure everybody knows about this? Is because at the end of the day, I hope that one person, can be protected, or, two people can see what's wrong with the system, or with the UFO stuff. It's, how can we make sure that other people are, if that are teetering on the brink of going down that really dangerous rabbit hole, or are grabbed by the shirt collar and pulled back from the brink of oblivion. And I really do think that we can make a difference. I know that you are. I think that your articles are incredibly important, especially given this climate right now. And it is important to teach people about this, even though these are difficult subjects to talk about, not only because you're being attacked, but because it's nobody wants to hear it. Like you mentioned, the far right wing, QAnon in Germany. Nobody wants to hear it, but this is important stuff.
Yeah,
So
and in terms of everything that you had to do to get some traction with your case, it's important for other people to see that it is possible to do it. I mean, you had to go to extreme lengths to do it, but it was possible.
yep, it is possible. And I've just got a comment from Jason, and he's like, I won't travel out of my city anymore. I won't leave home for my medical appointments and life sustaining supplies. And yes, I totally get it. That can make you feel like that. And it is, I mean, it is what it is. It's a it is an interesting time, and we can all be aware and be supportive of each other. And I definitely feel like in my community here that there are so many really incredible people from all sides of the aisle that really care about other human beings, and that care about our country, and that will do the right thing. Like, I know, for me, I want to believe that all hope is not lost. I know it's not, because like
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
so
There's a guy I know he's doing a documentary, and he read my Silent Civil War article, and he told me at the beginning of the article I talk about this woman I know who she was about to start doing a radio show in the late 90s about conspiracies and stuff like that, and she asked me, well, what piece of advice would you give me? Like, how do I parse out the disinformation from the misinformation and the real information? And I said, well, if you come upon someone who's like peddling fear, like the main feeling you have after listening to their story is that you're afraid, then that's probably disinformation. And the guy said to me, he goes, after I was done reading your article, I kind of felt afraid. So if so, it was not my intent to make him afraid, because you can be aware of information and not give in to fear, though that's certainly a natural uh, feeling to have, of course. But there is a way to take some sort of a Zen like approach to it, and to kind of like be outside yourself, looking at yourself, um, and uh, and be able to be cognizant of the dangers, but not given to fear at the same time. Alan Watts, the Zen Buddhist, he wrote a book called The Book on the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are. And there's a whole chapter in there called The Black and White Game. And it's all about how people often fall into that extreme of everything's either black or it's white, and there's nothing in between. And it's actually it might be a good book to read at this particular time period, just to get a kind of a grounding, so you don't just fall into feeling completely hopeless. Even if everything around you is out of control, you can take control of your own emotions and attitudes and the way you react to what's going on, And that book by Alan Watts, the book on the taboo against knowing who you are, as I would recommend that book. And so it's important to maintain a kind of distance, emotional distance from it, while also, not being afraid to shy away from the uncomfortable reality of the situation.
Absolutely, and I like that. I mean, I think that's really, it is important to be accountable. It is important to be knowledgeable. It is important to stand up and say, you know what, we have worked so hard I mean, decades. We have, my mother, people that I know, my grandfather, my grandparents. I mean, people that migrated to this country. There is a history of people that have created this wonderful country, and we're not going to be pushed down by extremists that want to try to take back or try to hold on to the last glimmer of control that they have, because America is beautiful in so many ways, and I know that there are people out there that feel the same. And so it is important to not shy away from conversations like this, because this is knowledge is empowering. And I think that I really think it's important to have this great conversation. I've kept you for an hour longer. You're such a trooper to do this.
It was, I want to say it was fun, because it was, but
It was.
it is, it's good to uh, throw this information against someone else, and see where it leads. And I wrote Operation Mindfuck as a kind of a tool. I mean, I put a bunch of information in there, so maybe that's something that you can give to someone else who might be willing to read it. And certainly, I do try to maintain some kind of a sense of humor about it. You have to, otherwise you'll go crazy.
Well, absolutely, and I think, you and I have had even though we're talking about serious things tonight, we've had moments of levity, and I think that's important, because it's sometimes, you just look at the people in the crowd, with their, whatever, the badge of honor on their ear, and you just think, "Oh my Lord," and you have to do it. I mean, nothing can, I don't even know what to say about that, but that's gonna go down in comedy showcase history. For
When
sure,
I
it's
was
one of the dumbest moments of, humanity, but
when I was 14, I discovered Kurt Vonnegut, who wrote Cat's Cradle and Slaughterhouse-Five, and master of black humor, dark satire, absurdist humor that nonetheless is illuminating. And um, I, I, I kind of, that kind of worldview like appeals to me, and has often helped me get through uh, very strange time. I mean, Camelio was very traumatizing in many ways, uh, but and particularly more so for Damien than me. But we kind of were able to get through it by joking about it. And there is a considerable amount of humor in Camelio. And sometimes I've done interviews about Camelio where people will call in and say, "Well, you're kind of like laughing about it. It makes me think maybe you're just like making all this up." And I'll just think, I don't know if this person's ever had a truly traumatic experience, because I
right.
think that humor is one of the best methods for dealing with traumatic experiences.
Absolutely. I mean, I go back and just think about some of the things that I've witnessed, just the shape-shifting werewolf. Never gonna get over that one. I mean, I
Yeah.
just
What
think,
about?
"Oh my Lord." And all you can do is laugh, because it is truly like a way that you process, that kind of trauma, and yeah, I think it is a healthy thing at certain points of time. And I was also thinking today, it's like the tinfoil hat has now been replaced by the ear bandage.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Very much so. I would agree. I mean, my wife works at Barnes and Noble. So when they opened up again after the lockdown, people were coming in from Orange County and pissed off that they had to wear a mask. And so they would have to tell them, you have to wear a mask to come in the store. And they were just throwing like hissy fits. And this one woman was yelling, she goes, I didn't know I woke up in the middle of Nazi Germany. And I thought, that's amazing. This woman lived through like Vietnam, like Iran Contra, you know, 9/11. She lived through the civil rights movement. You know, this was an old woman. She lived through all that, but not until she was asked to wear a mask did she wake up and think she was in Nazi Germany.
Isn't that sad, that the amount of brainwashing
Oh
that
yeah,
went on?
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I pray. Well, I don't know. I'm not going to pray, but I bathe in holy water. Maybe not even that, but I mean, something something needs to happen. But I honestly, I think just having conversations like this it's so important. And I know that I've got a great network of people that listen to the show and that want to get information out about this and understand what's going on in our world. And Steve Long, yes, I did say maxi pads because that did remind me of a little moment there, a little Kotex moment. So,
Well, you did get the sense that he must have asked the doctor, what is the largest bandage you have? Give me one that's 5 times bigger than that. It was, I mean, the first time I saw it, I thought, this is really, particularly since his son said in an interview, he doesn't even have any stitches. He goes, just a major flesh wound. So
it's just
it's
a
like, if
flesh
he had
wound.
before we go, may I shamelessly plug something?
Yes.
My latest book is called Cryptopolis and Other Stories. It's a collection of 25 short stories published by Lethe Press. And it's 25 stories I published between the year 2000 and 2023. And actually, there are many stories in there that tie into kind of high strangeness, UFOs. There's a story, Adventures in the Head Wound, which is dedicated to Paul Krasner, who I mentioned earlier, which is all about the JFK assassination, because these two teenagers smoke some grass from the grassy knoll, which propels their astral bodies through time and space back to November 22nd, 1963, and they actually get to see what happened on that fateful day. Well, that was a story rejected more than 100 times, by the way, and one magazine sent it back to me ripped in half. So you should. That's the one story in the book that has never appeared anywhere except in the book. All the other 24 stories were published elsewhere first. So a lot of the stories deal with like UFOs, Freemasonry, dreams. Some of the stories were inspired by dreams. But anyway, I'm very proud of it. I've always enjoyed writing short stories, and I think that reading the book will send you into a weird headspace.
I love it.
So if you want to get my latest book, Cryptopolis and Other Stories, available on Amazon.
And also your website. I mean, people should go to your website to see everything that you've been working on and blogging on for many, 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 many years.
Yes, and also I have my next book coming out soon from Madness Heart Press. The book is called The Expectant Mother Disinformation Handbook, and when you read it, you'll see that it satirically deals with some of the subjects we've been talking about tonight.
Well, I have to say that it has been a pleasure to interview you and to talk with you, off, and privately about certain things over the years. And I love and I appreciate when you send me your wonderful books. They are like the highlight of my collection. So that it really means a lot to me that you do that for me personally, and that you come on the show and have such great conversations with me that are needed. And we've had a strange trip together in our own little world with the Chris thing and the QAnon and the Bigelow and Camelio and everything like that. So I appreciate that. I just am a big fan of your work, and I really thank you for coming on the show and spending 3 hours with us and dealing with technical difficulties.
I thank you for inviting me on, and it was a pleasure. I'd be happy to come on again whenever you want me to.
Oh, you will. Trust me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And have a wonderful night and congratulations on your anniversary. You guys go have a romantic weekend.
I thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Take care. All right, guys, thanks for rolling with me for such a wonderful interview, 3-hour interview. I love it. I could keep talking to Robert all night very clearly, but I want to thank you for also rolling with technical challenges that we've had and supporting the show and my work with Jack at Expanding Frontiers Research. So you can go there to check out our blog. Make sure that you also stay tuned for future developments because we just had some more records released with regard to Uinta County. So some of that is included body cam footage that will be coming out. We've also received more reports about Ramtha Jay-Z Night. So we will be adding that to Expanding Frontiers Research. You can go there to support us. So make sure you do. I appreciate all of you guys. Thanks, Steve, for running defense for me, and Peter with the technical difficulties. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe, you guys, and I will catch you soon. Have a great night.